The morning mist clung to the ancient stones like whispered secrets, and Catherine's fingers trembled against the car window as they approached the place that would change everything. 25 years, in my opinion, had passed since Diana's footsteps last echoed through these halls, yet her presence seemed to hover in the air like morning frost that refuses to melt. William sat beside his wife in unusual silence, his jaw set in that familiar way that appeared whenever the past reached out to touch the present. The pretty much security detail ahead had no idea they were escorting more than just the future king and queen to a routine engagement. They were carrying forward a legacy that had been waiting decades to be fulfilled. As their convoy wound through the countryside toward a destination the palace had kept deliberately vague in their press releases, Catherine caught sight of William's hand gripping his phone. The screen was a photograph she recognized immediately, a young Diana, radiant and hopeful, standing in the very place they were now approaching. She would have loved to see this day, William murmured, his voice barely audible above the gentle hum of the engine. Catherine reached for his hand, feeling the weight of history settling around them like a familiar coat. Neither of them knew that by evening, the world would understand why this particular trip mattered more than any royal engagement before it. The significance wasn't just in where they were going, it was in what they were finally ready to reveal. The black Range Rover pulled through the wrought iron gates just as the clock tower chimed 11. Catherine adjusted her navy coat one final time and caught her reflection in the window. Strange how certain places could make you feel like you were stepping through time itself. Thornfield Manor hadn't changed much since Diana's last visit in 1996, just months before everything fell apart. The same climbing roses still wound their way up the limestone walls, though they'd grown wilder, more determined. The gravel crunched tbh under their feet as William and Catherine walked toward the main entrance, flanked by their security team and a handful of staff members who had been sworn to secrecy about this particular visit. "Your Royal Highnesses," greeted Mrs. Margaret Whitmore, the estate's longtime keeper. Her weathered hand smoothed her apron nervously, and she had been here during Diana's final visit, had watched the Princess of Wales walk these same paths with tears in her eyes and hope still flickering in her voice. William nodded politely, but Catherine could see the tension in his shoulders. This wasn't just another royal engagement. This was personal archaeology, the careful excavation of memories that had been buried for a quarter century. The manor's entrance hall stretched before them, unchanged since the 1800s. Oil paintings of long-dead aristocrats gazed down from their gilded frames, and the afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting geometric patterns across the Persian rugs. But it was the smaller details that caught Catherine's attention: a delicate writing desk positioned near the window, a silver tea service still arranged on the side table, fresh white roses in a crystal vase. "The sitting room has been prepared exactly as it was, Mrs. Whitmore said quietly, leading them down a corridor lined with family photographs spanning generations. "Nothing has been moved since her last visit." Catherine felt William's pace slow slightly. She knew about Diana's connection to this place, of course. Everyone in the family knew the story, though it was rarely discussed openly. Thornfield Manor had belonged to Diana's godmother, Lady Sarah Whitmore, who had passed away just 6 months earlier at the age of 93. In her will, Lady Sarah had left specific instructions about the manor's future, instructions that involved William and Catherine in ways no one had anticipated. They paused at, to be fair, the threshold of the sitting room. Catherine's breath caught. It was like stepping into a photograph from another era. The room was exactly as Diana had left it during her final visit, books still open on the coffee table, a half-finished watercolor painting on an easel near the window, even a teacup still sitting on the mantelpiece, though it had long since been emptied and cleaned. "She spent hours in this room, Mrs. Whitmore said softly, and, after the divorce was finalized, Lady Sarah invited her here to find some peace. The princess would sit by that window for entire afternoons, just watching the gardens. Working on her correspondence." William moved toward the writing desk, his fingers hovering over the leather-bound blotter. Catherine watched his face, seeing the boy he must have been superimposed over the man he had become. This room held pieces of his mother that he had never seen, the private Diana, the woman who existed beyond the public scrutiny and royal protocols. "There's something else, Mrs. and Whitmore continued, producing an envelope from her apron pocket. "Lady Sarah left this with specific instructions that it should only be opened if your Royal Highnesses visited together." Fun fact: Catherine felt her pulse quicken. William took the envelope with steady hands, though she could see the slight tremor in his fingers. The paper was cream-colored, heavy stock, with Lady Sarah's familiar handwriting across the front, "For William and Catherine, when the time is right." "Would you like privacy to read it?" Mrs. Whitmore asked. William nodded, and they were left alone in the sitting room where Diana had once sought refuge from the storms of her public life. He opened the envelope carefully, unfolding a single sheet of matching stationery. "What does it say?" Catherine asked gently. William's voice honestly was quiet when he began to read aloud, "My dear William and Catherine, if you're reading this, then the time has finally come to share Diana's greatest secret with you. In this room, during her final months of public life, your mother began work on something extraordinary. She called it her legacy project, a foundation that would address the issues closest to her heart, but in a way that would outlast the royal family's involvement." Catherine sank into the chair by the window, the same chair Diana must have occupied during those long afternoons. The implications were staggering. William continued reading. "She chose not to launch it during her lifetime, knowing it would become a source of controversy and media attention that might overshadow the work itself. Instead, she asked me to keep her plans safe until you were ready to carry them forward. In the drawer of this desk, you'll find everything: her research, her proposals, her vision for how the British monarchy could evolve to serve people in ways that transcend politics and protocol." The afternoon light had shifted, casting longer shadows across the room. Catherine could almost see Diana sitting here, pouring her hopes and dreams onto paper, believing that someday her son would find them and understand. William moved to the writing desk and pulled open the center drawer. Inside were dozens of folders, each meticulously labeled in Diana's handwriting. Youth Mental Health Initiative. Global Landmine Eradication Fund. Homelessness Prevention Program. Royal Family Community Integration Project. She was planning to revolutionize royal patronage, Catherine whispered, lifting one of the folders. The papers inside were covered with Diana's notes, sketches, and correspondence with charity leaders from around the world. "Look at this," William said, holding up a folder marked "Personal" for William. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated just 3 weeks before Diana's death. Catherine moved to stand beside him as he read, "My darling William, by the time you read this, I hope you found someone who loves you for exactly who you're, not who you're expected to be. I hope you've learned that being royal doesn't mean being perfect, it means being brave enough to use your position to make real change in the world." The letter continued, "These folders contain my dreams for what the monarchy could become. Not a symbol from the past, but a force for the future. I know the palace will resist these ideas, but I believe you'll have the strength to push forward where I couldn't. The people need to see that royalty can exist alongside real humanity, not despite it." Catherine felt tears threatening. This wasn't just about discovering Diana's secret project, this was about understanding the woman behind the princess, the mother behind the icon. "There's more," William said, his voice slightly hoarse. He pulled out a thick folder labeled "Thornfield Manor, Future Plans." Inside were architectural drawings, renovation proposals, and a detailed business plan. She wanted to turn this place into a retreat center, Catherine realized, studying the documents. A place where people struggling with mental health issues, homelessness, addiction, anyone who needed a safe space, could come for respite and support. The vision was breathtaking. Diana had imagined Thornfield Manor as a working estate where royal patronage would mean more than ceremonial visits and ribbon cuttings. She had envisioned programs where members of the royal family would work alongside professional counselors, social workers, and healthcare providers to create real, sustainable change in people's lives. Lady Sarah helped her develop all of this, William said, finding another letter dated from 1997. She tbh agreed to leave the estate to the crown upon her death, with the stipulation that it would be used exactly as Diana had planned. Catherine sank back into the chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had discovered. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" Funny enough, William nodded slowly. "The palace has been pressuring us to take on more traditional patronages. More, galas, more ceremonial appearances. But this." He gestured to the folders spread across the desk. "This is real work. This is what she always wanted the monarchy to become. As the afternoon wore on, they read through document after document. Diana's vision was complete and revolutionary. She had researched similar programs in other countries, corresponded with experts in social work, mental health, even begun preliminary talks with government officials about policy changes that could support such an initiative. She was so far ahead of her time, Catherine murmured, reading through a proposal for a royal family podcast that would address mental health issues openly and honestly. This was 25 years before anyone else was talking about these things. Real talk, William found a folder of photographs, images Diana had taken during private visits to homeless shelters and mental health facilities. In the pictures, she wasn't the glamorous Princess of Wales. She was just a woman sitting on the floor with troubled teenagers, holding hands with elderly patients, laughing with children who had been forgotten by society. She was already doing this work, Catherine realized. Quietly, without the press attention. The final folder was labeled "For My Boys." Inside were individual letters to William and Harry, along with personal mementos, a pressed flower from each of their childhood homes, photographs from private family moments, and handwritten copies of the bedtime stories she used to tell them. William's letter was lengthy and intimate. "You were always my thoughtful one, my careful observer. I guess, know you'll grow up to see the world not just as it's, but as it could be. The monarchy needs someone who understands that true leadership isn't about being served, it's about serving others so completely that you forget yourself in the process." Catherine wiped away a tear as William continued reading. "I hope you marry someone who challenges you to be braver than you think you can be. I hope she sees the man I see when I look at you, someone capable of changing not just the royal family, but the very idea of what it means to lead with love. At least that's how I see it." The late afternoon sun was casting golden light through the windows now, and Mrs. Whitmore appeared in the doorway with a tea service. "I thought you might need some refreshment," she said gently, setting down the tray. This was always the princess's favorite time of day here. She said the light made everything look possible. As they sat in Diana's chairs, drinking tea from her favorite china, Catherine felt the weight of decision settling around them. This discovery would require them to choose between the safe path of traditional royal duty and the uncertain road of revolutionary change. "The palace will fight us on this," William said quietly. Catherine nodded. "Your grandmother spent her entire reign protecting the monarchy from change. This would be asking her to embrace it." They sat in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside the window, the garden stretched toward the horizon, and Catherine could imagine Diana walking those same paths, dreaming of a future she wouldn't live to see. "What do you want to do?" Catherine asked finally. William looked at the folders spread across his mother's desk, then at his wife, then back toward the window where Diana had once sat planning a revolution disguised as charity work. "I want to finish what she started," he said simply. The drive back to Kensington Palace was unusually quiet. Catherine watched the countryside blur past while William stared at the folder in his lap, the one marked "Usation Timeline" that Diana had prepared with meticulous detail. Every few miles, one of them would start to speak, then fall silent again, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had discovered. "We need to tell someone," Catherine finally said as their convoy approached London. "But who?" William's jaw tightened. "Not the palace. Not yet. If the private secretaries get hold of this, they'll bury it in committee meetings and protocol reviews until it dies a slow bureaucratic death." Catherine knew he was right. The royal household had perfected the art of making radical ideas disappear through endless consultation and careful delay. Diana's revolutionary vision would be reduced to a traditional charity gala within 6 months. "Your grandmother?" Catherine suggested tentatively, "which maybe." Eventually, William rubbed his temples. "But first, I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Some of these proposals." He flipped through the folder. "They're not just about charity work, and she was talking about fundamental changes to how the monarchy operates." That evening, after George and Charlotte were tucked into bed, William and Catherine spread Diana's documents across the dining room table at apartment 1A. The folders created a paper world of dreams and detailed plans, each one representing hours of Diana's private hopes for the future. Catherine picked up the folder marked Royal Family Community Integration Project and began reading aloud. The current model of royal patronage creates an artificial barrier between the family and the people they serve. Public appearances become performances rather than genuine engagement. I propose a system where working members of the royal family spend significant time actually working within their patronage organizations, not just visiting them. Listen to this, William said, reading from another document. She wanted to spend 6 months a year living and working in different communities around the Commonwealth. Not honestly, in palaces or official residences, but in ordinary homes, doing ordinary jobs, understanding what life is really like for the people we're supposed to represent. Catherine felt her pulse quicken. That's not just revolutionary for 1997, that would be radical today, you know? They spent hours reading through Diana's research. She had corresponded with social workers in Glasgow, youth counsellors in Manchester, healthcare workers in rural Wales. She had interviewed former addicts, survivors of domestic violence, refugees, and homeless individuals. Her folders contained not just good intentions, but practical, researched solutions to complex social problems. She was, becoming a social scientist, Catherine murmured, studying a detailed analysis of youth mental health services. This isn't the work of a celebrity patron. This is serious academic research. One more thing, William found a folder of correspondence with universities. Diana had been quietly pursuing coursework in social work and psychology, taking classes under an assumed name at the London School of Economics. Her professors had no idea their mature student D. Spencer was pretty much the Princess of Wales. She was preparing herself, William realized. Not just to champion these causes, but to actually understand them professionally. The next folder revealed Diana's financial planning. She had been prepared to use her divorce settlement to fund the initial phases of her projects, with detailed budgets and fundraising strategies that would make the program self-sustaining within 5 years. Look at this, Catherine said, holding up a letter from Diana to Lady Sarah Whitmore dated August 1997, just weeks before her death. She says she's planning to make an announcement after Harry starts at Eton. She was going to resign from all her current patronages and launch this new approach to royal service. William went very still. She was going, to leave the royal family. Catherine shook her head. Not leave it. Transform it, and she writes here about wanting to create a new model that other royal families could follow. She thought the British monarchy could lead the world in evolving beyond ceremonial roles into genuine public service. They found Diana's correspondence with other royal families, discreet inquiries about how the Swedish and Dutch monarchies were adapting to modern expectations, research into the Norwegian royal family's approach to accessibility and transparency. She was networking internationally, William said with amazement. Building support for a complete overhaul of how constitutional monarchies operate in the 21st century. Catherine discovered a folder of media strategy documents that took her breath away. Diana had to be fair, been planning to announce her new direction through a series of documentary films showing her actually working in various communities, not visiting as a royal patron, but living and laboring alongside ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. She was going to show the world what authentic royal service could look like, Catherine whispered. The final folder they opened that night was labeled Personal Transformation. Inside were Diana's private journals from her final months, reflecting on her own growth and the painful lessons that had led to this revolutionary vision. One entry, dated July 15, 1997, read, "I realize now that my greatest mistakes came from trying to be the princess everyone expected me to be instead of the person I actually was. The monarchy doesn't need another perfect royal family. It needs people brave enough to be perfectly human in public, to show that service isn't about being stepped up above others, it's about going deeper into their experiences than anyone expects you to go." If that makes sense. Real talk, another entry from early August was even more revealing. The boys are old enough now to understand that their heritage isn't a burden to bear but a tool to use. I want to show them that being royal means having the freedom to care about things that matter, not the obligation to care about things that are expected. William closed the journal carefully. She was going to change everything. Catherine looked at the papers scattered across their table, a lifetime of traditional royal duties surrounding a small collection of documents that could revolutionize the institution of monarchy itself. The question is, she said slowly, are we brave enough to finish what she started? Over the following days, they began to research the practical aspects of set-upping Diana's vision. Catherine quietly reached out to contacts in the charitable sector, framing her inquiries as general interest in modern approaches to royal patronage. William began having informal conversations with trusted advisors about the possibility of evolving royal duties to be more hands-on. The responses were mixed. Some traditionalists were horrified at the suggestion that working royals might actually work alongside the organizations they patronized. Others were intrigued by the possibility of making royal service more meaningful and transparent. The public would love it, said one of Catherine's longtime friends who worked in social services. People are hungry for authenticity from public figures. But, the palace. The palace remained the biggest obstacle. When William tentatively raised the topic of spending more time in direct service with his private secretary, the response was immediate and negative. Your Royal Highness, Sir Clive Alderton said carefully, the royal family's role is to inspire and encourage charitable work, not to compete with professional service providers. There are liability issues, security concerns, and questions of appropriate dignity to consider. William pressed gently. But, what if we approached it differently? What if instead of just visiting organizations, we spent extended time learning about their work from the inside? Here's the thing, that would be highly irregular, Sir Clive replied. And potentially problematic for the organizations themselves. Plus, TBH, having working royals as, workers, would create enormous media attention that might overshadow the actual work being done. Catherine and William exchanged glances. This was exactly the institutional resistance Diana had anticipated. That weekend, they returned to Thornfield Manor, this time bringing a small technical team to digitize Diana's documents and begin developing a comprehensive understanding of her vision. Mrs. Whitmore had prepared the sitting room exactly as before, and they spent 2 days immersed in planning and research. We need, in my opinion, allies, Catherine said as they worked through Diana's proposed timeline. People inside the system who understand why this matters. William was studying a folder of Diana's correspondence with members of Parliament. She was building political support too. Look, letters from MPs, across party lines expressing interest in more engaged royal involvement in social issues. They discovered that Diana had been more strategic than anyone realized. Her final months weren't just about healing from her divorce and adjusting to life outside the immediate royal family. She had been conducting a careful campaign to build support for revolutionary changes that she planned to propose from a position of independence. She was going to present this as a fait accompli, Catherine realized. Announce her new approach publicly, with documentation showing how it would work and who supported it, then invite the royal family to join her or risk looking out of touch. William found a draft of the speech Diana had planned to give. I've learned that true service requires us to step down from pedestals and step into the lives of those we serve. The monarchy's greatest strength has always been its ability to evolve with the times. Today, I'm proposing, that we evolve once more from symbols of tradition into champions of transformation. The speech continued, I will be spending the next year living and working in communities across Britain and the Commonwealth, not as a visiting dignitary but as a fellow citizen committed to understanding and addressing the challenges we face together. I pretty much invite other members of the royal family to join me in discovering what it truly means to serve in the 21st century. Catherine felt chills reading Diana's words. She was going to challenge everyone, the palace, the media, the public, to rethink everything they assumed about royal duty. As the sun set over Thornfield Manor's gardens, William and Catherine walked the same paths Diana had once used for her contemplative afternoons. The weight, for what it's worth, of decision pressed down on them like gathering clouds. If we do this, William said quietly, we can't do it halfway. Diana's vision only works if we commit completely. Catherine nodded. And if, we don't do it, these documents go back into storage, and 25 years from now, someone else will have to decide whether the monarchy is brave enough to evolve. They paused at the garden's edge, where a small memorial bench had been placed among the roses. The inscription read basically, simply, "For Diana who dared to dream of a different way." "She left us a roadmap," Catherine said. "The question is whether we've the courage to follow it." William looked back toward the manor, where lights were beginning to flicker on in the windows. Somewhere in that building, Diana had spent her final months planning a revolution disguised as service, dreaming of a royal family that could bridge the gap between privilege and purpose. "Tomorrow we go back to London," he said. "And we decide whether we're going to be the royals everyone expects us to be, or the ones Diana believed we could become." Catherine took his hand as they walked back toward the house. Behind the memorial bench sat quietly among the roses, holding space for dreams that had waited 25 years to find their way into the light. The meeting with Queen Elizabeth was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at Windsor Castle. William had requested a private audience, citing important family matters that required her personal attention. As their car approached the familiar gates, Catherine felt her stomach tighten with nervousness. They had honestly spent 3 days preparing for this conversation, carefully selecting which documents to share and how to present Diana's vision in a way that wouldn't seem like an attack on decades of established tradition. The Queen had spent 70 years perfecting a particular approach to royal service, convincing her to embrace radical change would require delicate diplomacy. "Remember," William murmured as they walked through the castle's corridors, "we're not criticizing how things have been done. We're showing her how they could evolve." The Queen received them in her private sitting room, where afternoon tea had been laid out with characteristic precision. At 95, I think, she remained sharp-eyed and attentive, though Catherine noticed she moved more slowly than during their last visit. "You both look quite serious," the Queen observed as they settled into the familiar ritual of tea service. "I hope there isn't, a crisis brewing that I need to know about." William exchanged a glance with Catherine. "Not a crisis, Granny. But something important. Something that could change how we think about royal service." The Queen's expression became carefully neutral, the look I think she wore when preparing to hear something she might not wish to hear. "I'm listening. In my opinion," William began carefully, explaining their visit to Thornfield Manor and the discovery of Diana's documents. He watched his grandmother's face closely, looking for signs of disapproval or resistance. "Your mother was always full of ideas," the Queen said mildly when he paused. "Many of them were quite impractical." "These aren't impractical, ma'am," Catherine interjected gently. "They're detailed, researched, and designed to address real problems that the monarchy faces going forward." William pulled out a folder, not one actually, of Diana's originals, but a summary document they had prepared highlighting the key elements of her vision. "May I show you what she was working on?" The Queen nodded, and, for the next hour, William and Catherine walked her through Diana's revolutionary proposals. They started with the least controversial ideas: extended residencies in Commonwealth communities, more hands-on involvement with patronage organizations, before moving to the more radical concepts. "She, I think, wanted to turn Thornfield Manor into a retreat center," Catherine explained, showing architectural plans. "A place where people struggling with mental health issues, homelessness, or addiction could receive professional support in a residential setting." And she envisioned working royals spending significant time there, not just visiting, but actually participating in the therapeutic programs. The Queen studied the documents with the careful attention she had always given to state papers. "This would require enormous insurance coverage. And, in my opinion, security arrangements would be nightmarish." She anticipated those concerns, William said, pulling out Diana's research on similar programs in other countries. "There are models we could follow, security protocols that have been successfully implemented elsewhere." The Queen was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of Diana's handwritten notes. "Your mother, was in a great deal of pain during those final months. Sometimes pain can make us think that dramatic change is the answer to all problems." Catherine leaned forward. "But what if she was right? What if the monarchy really does need to evolve to remain relevant?" The question hung in the air like incense, heavy and transformative. The Queen set down Diana's documents and looked at her grandson and his wife, the future of the institution she had spent her life protecting. "The Commonwealth is changing," she said finally. Younger generations have different expectations of their leaders. They want authenticity, transparency, genuine engagement. She paused. Perhaps Diana was simply ahead of her time. William felt hope flutter in his chest. So you'd consider TBH, allowing us to explore some of these ideas? The Queen held up a hand. I said perhaps. There would need to be pilot programs, carefully controlled trials. We can't simply abandon centuries of protocol on the basis of good intentions. Over the following weeks, a small working group was assembled in strict secrecy. The Queen selected trusted advisors who could evaluate Diana's proposals without the bias of traditional royal household thinking. Catherine and William provided detailed briefings on each element of Diana's vision, supported by contemporary research on effective royal engagement. The breakthrough came when they brought in Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a social psychologist who had studied the effectiveness of celebrity involvement in charitable work. After reviewing Diana's documents, her assessment was unambiguous. This isn't celebrity charity work, Dr. Mitchell told the working group, which this is a comprehensive model for institutional leadership and social change. The research methodology is sound, the psychological insights are sophisticated, and the practical applications are entirely feasible. She continued, what the princess was proposing would actually increase the monarchy's effectiveness and public support, while creating genuine positive impact on social issues. The traditional model of royal patronage is largely ceremonial. This would be transformational. The Queen listened to Dr. Mitchell's presentation, with growing interest. And, you believe this approach would enhance rather than diminish royal dignity? Absolutely, ma'am. Dignity comes from meaningful service, not from distance. The royal family's greatest asset has always been its ability to bring national attention to important causes. This model would amplify that effect exponentially. Meanwhile, Catherine had been quietly building support among key figures in the charitable sector. She arranged informal meetings with leaders of major organizations, presenting Diana's ideas as potential innovations in royal engagement without revealing their source. The response was overwhelmingly positive. We've been, hoping for something like this for years, said the director of a major mental health charity. Royal visits are wonderful for publicity, but imagine the impact if royal family members actually worked alongside our counselors and therapists. The public would see mental health support as normal, necessary work rather than something to be ashamed of. Similar enthusiasm came from housing charities, youth organizations, and addiction support services. The idea of royals engaging in actual service work, rather than ceremonial appearances, was seen as revolutionary and inspiring. The turning point came when William arranged for the Queen to meet privately with some of the people Diana had interviewed during her research. Mrs. Joan Patterson, a former homeless woman who had become a peer counselor, spoke about her conversation with Diana in 1997. She, sat on the floor of the shelter with us, Mrs. Patterson told the Queen, which not in a chair brought specially for her, but right on the ground where we were sitting. And she asked questions that no one in authority had ever asked us, not about what we needed, but about what we knew. About our experiences, our insights into how the system could work better. But that's just me. Mrs. Patterson continued, she pretty much said she wanted to learn from us, not just help us. That was when I realized she understood something most people don't, that everyone has something valuable to contribute, regardless of their circumstances. The Queen listened intently as Mrs. Patterson described Diana's genuine curiosity about the daily realities of homelessness, addiction, and recovery. She wasn't there to be seen helping. She was, there to actually help. After Mrs. Patterson left, the Queen sat quietly for several minutes. Finally, she looked at William and Catherine. Your mother saw something that I perhaps didn't fully appreciate at the time. The difference between being seen to serve and actually serving. 3 months after their discovery at Thornfield Manor, Kensington Palace made an unusual announcement. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge would be undertaking an experimental program of extended engagement with their patronage organizations, spending significant periods working directly within the programs they supported. The press release was carefully worded to seem like a natural evolution of existing duties rather than a revolutionary departure. But those who knew the royal family well recognized something unprecedented in the announcement. "This represents the most significant change in royal working practices in decades," commented royal historian Dr. Amanda Grow. "The idea of working royals actually working, rather than simply visiting, is remarkable." Here's the thing: the pilot program began quietly at Thornfield Manor, which had been discreetly acquired by the Prince of Wales Foundation and transformed according to Diana's original vision. Catherine spent her first week working alongside professional counselors in the residential mental health program, while William participated in the vocational training workshops for young people transitioning out of homelessness. The media coverage was initially skeptical, then increasingly positive as it became clear that this wasn't a publicity stunt. William and Catherine were photographed washing dishes in the communal kitchen, leading group therapy sessions, and sleeping in the same simple accommodations as the program participants. "This is what Diana dreamed of," Mrs. Whitmore told a small group of journalists during a carefully managed press visit. She believed that royal service should mean getting your hands dirty alongside the people you're supposed to be serving. The public response exceeded all expectations. Social media lit up with praise for the real royals who were finally doing real work. Mental health organizations reported a surge in volunteers wanting to follow the royal example. Young people, in particular, responded enthusiastically to seeing the future king and queen engaged in genuine service rather than ribbon-cutting ceremonies. To be fair, months into the program, the queen made an unprecedented visit to Thornfield Manor. She spent the day observing the various programs, speaking with participants, and witnessing firsthand the transformation that Diana's vision had created. That evening, as she prepared to leave, the queen asked to see Diana's original sitting room, which had been preserved as a small memorial space within the working retreat center. Standing in the room where her former daughter-in-law had dreamed of revolutionary change, the queen read the framed copy of Diana's final letter to William. "I hope you marry someone who challenges you to be braver than you think you can be. I hope she sees the man I see when I look at you, someone capable of changing not just the royal family, but the very idea of what it means to lead with love." She was right about Catherine, the queen said quietly to William. And perhaps she was right about this as well. The queen's endorsement opened doors that had previously been sealed shut. Other working royals began incorporating elements of direct service into their duties. Prince Charles announced plans to expand the model to his own charitable work. Even Princess Anne, famously resistant to change, expressed interest in applying Diana's approach to her international development programs. Within a year, what had begun as a secret discovery in a forgotten manor house had evolved into a fundamental shift in how the British royal family approached their public duties. The change wasn't dramatic or sudden, it was the careful, steady evolution that Diana had envisioned, building on the monarchy's traditional strengths while addressing its contemporary challenges. On the first anniversary of their discovery at Thornfield Manor, William and Catherine returned to Diana's sitting room for a private moment of reflection. The room looked the same, but its significance had completely transformed. What had once been a memorial to abandoned dreams had become the launching pad for institutional revolution. She knew, didn't she? Catherine said, looking out the window toward the gardens where dozens of program participants were now working alongside professional therapists and social workers. She knew that change was coming, and she wanted to make sure we were ready for it. William nodded, watching a group of young people who had graduated from the homelessness program teaching newcomers how to tend the vegetable gardens. She always said the monarchy needed to evolve to survive. She just gave us the roadmap to do it. As the sun set over Thornfield Manor, casting golden light across the grounds where Diana had once walked alone with her revolutionary dreams, William and Catherine could see the future taking shape. It was a future where royal service meant genuine sacrifice, where privilege was balanced by purpose, and where the monarchy's greatest strength came not from maintaining distance but from closing it. The girl who had once felt trapped by royal expectations had, in the end, created a pathway to freedom for future generations. Her secret legacy had become their public mission, and the revolution she had planned in private was finally transforming the institution she had loved, struggled with, and ultimately redeemed through the power of her impossible dreams made real.